Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Monday, May 17th, 2021. On today's episode, we're going to discuss the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Hoai-Tran Bui.
Hey, everyone.
Okay, we don't have that much news today, but there is some big stuff. But we'll start small and go big. Let's start off first with the next film from Travis Knight. He's, of course, the director of Bumblebee, and he did some stop motion animation stuff over at Laika. Ben, tell us about it.
Yes, so Travis Knight is attached to direct a vampire action thriller called Uprising, which is going to be over at Netflix. It's going to be produced by 21 Laps, which is the production company that Sean Levy and Dan Cohen run. They work on shows like Stranger Things over at Netflix. So this movie, Uprising, is based on a book that came out a couple years ago called A People's History of the Vampire Uprising. And it is about, it's set after a global viral outbreak turns people into vampires. And it follows CIA agent Lauren Webb, who works against the clock to uncover the truth behind a growing uprising that threatens to wipe out humanity, Peter. It's very big and, important and vampire-y. So this is it sounds like, I've not read this book myself, but I did a little digging into it, and it actually sounds more interesting than that synopsis makes it seem. That synopsis is kind of a little bland. It sort of sounds like we've seen tons of projects like this before, but digging a little bit into the actual book itself, it sounds like the book approaches this as sort of a little bit more of a realistic angle of like what might happen if a bunch of vampires suddenly, burst into our society. There's a division that forms where this newfound vampire population actually becomes like the dominant force in the society, and one of them runs for political office, and there's a secret terrorist organization that's sort of lurking in the shadows. So it all sounds a little bit more like satirical and a little bit more grounded than that sort of absurd premise makes it seem. And it kind of sounds like an interesting change of pace for Travis Knight, who, as you mentioned, has done a lot of Laika stuff. And then Bumblebee, I think, is his only live action movie that we've seen thus far. So yeah, this could end up being, something that's a little bit more, I hate to use this term, but like dark and gritty than some of the stuff that we've seen him do before.
Yeah, when you read the initial concept for the book, it made me think, oh, someone read World War Z and was like, let's do this with vampires. But it definitely seems a lot different than that.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what Travis Knight does, because, he basically gave up, or I guess he didn't give up. He's still over at Laika, but, he was running things at Laika and directing anything he wanted for that studio. And now, he wants to make his go in live action. And it's interesting to see the projects that he's choosing, because Bumblebee made more sense for me with Travis Knight. This seems like a weird choice, which is weird is probably a bad word. More interesting choice for Travis Knight. So I'm excited to see more about this as it ramps up. Let's move on. Let's talk about Amazon's Lord of the Rings series. It has recruited another director. HT, tell me about it.
Yes, so Amazon's Lord of the Rings series has hired Swedish-French filmmaker Charlotte Brandstrom, who has directed episodes of The Witcher and Outlander, to direct the next two episodes of Lord of the Rings. She's going to be following J.A. Bayona, who directs the first two, the pilot and the second episode, and then British Chinese director Wayne Che-Yip, who directs next four episodes after that. And the show is currently filming in New Zealand.
And how many episodes is the first season of this? It's not that long, right? It's
not that long. I don't think there's a set
eight episodes. I have it in front of me. Sorry, it's 8 episodes. So that is 2 + 4 + 2. So that's all the directors, right?
Yeah, that sounds like it.
Yeah, if my math serves me correct. What do you guys think of this director? Actually, what do you think of this director lineup for Lord of the Rings TV series?
Well, other than J.A. Bayona, they seem to be hiring a lot of people from genre TV. And Wayne Che-Yip, I'm mostly familiar with from Doctor Who. He directed a couple of episodes that were really promising. And from the most recent seasons. And Charlotte Brandstrom, meanwhile, has directed things from The Witcher, from The Man in the High Castle, Outlander, and she's also directed episodes of the recent Netflix series Jupiter's Legacy. So she clearly has a skill and aptitude for genre shows. And The Witcher, for example, is also a good training ground for a high fantasy epic like Lord of the Rings. So yeah, it seems like promising. I can't say I know a lot about Charlotte Brandstrom's stuff. I've seen The Witcher, I've seen Outlander, but she isn't a name that I know off the top of my head. But J.A. Bayona, we know, of course, from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and various other horror films like The Orphanage, I think. But he seems like he's probably going to be the one who's going to set the house style for the series before Wayne Che-Yip and Charlotte Brandstrom take the mantle.
Yeah. With the show this big, they're spending almost $500 million on the first season. These 8 episodes alone. I think I was expecting the lineup of directors to just be like big screen people like J.A. Bayona, like makes sense. The other two, I mean, I guess it makes sense because you want someone that knows TV, but I think I was expecting these big names because Lord of the Rings is just such a huge property and it's going to be something on such an epic scale. I know, Ben, you're a big Lord of the Rings fan, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah, what do you think of this lineup of directors?
I initially had the same thought as you, where I thought they were going to go for, top shelf, like super recognizable people. But I'm actually kind of excited by the fact that they're not doing that because it makes this show a little bit more of a question mark. And it's the same thing with the casting, too. If you look at the cast of the show, it's like you might recognize 1 or 2 people from a couple things here and there, but it's not like a bunch of super famous people. So I kind of love that it's going to be more of a mystery to people and more of a fresh experience where you walk in and you don't really know what you're going to get except for those gorgeous New Zealand backdrops because the whole show is going to be filmed in New Zealand like the Peter Jackson's movies were. So I think that's going to be a huge part of it is just like that backdrop is going to do a ton of the work here. And I'm excited to see what these like sort of up and coming people do, because this is the kind of thing, Amazon has said in the past, like, we need a lot of people to tune into this to justify the money that we're spending on it, basically. And so this is the kind of show where I feel like they can take some chances because they know that the name recognition alone is going to get a lot of people to tune in. And I would love for this to be sort of a launch pad for people whose names we're not super familiar with to become, the next big thing.
Yeah, I also thought if they were going to hire TV directors, I thought they would just like hire from the Game of Thrones lineup because that would be the easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it seems they're going for some more interesting names here, which is good. Okay, let's move on. Let's go over to Warner Brothers, where JJ Abrams is right now. He's developing a bunch of DC projects for Bad Robot, but he doesn't want to direct. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, JJ Abrams is not interested in directing any of the DC stuff that his Bad Robot production company is developing over there. So there are pieces of intellectual property like Justice League Dark, Constantine, and there's a new Superman movie coming that are all going to be sort of produced by Bad Robot and released under the Warner Brothers or WarnerMedia banner. But in a new interview, Abrams basically says that Hollywood is a place where, I'll read part of his quote here. He says, "I know that Hollywood is a place where it used to be that people would be inspired by something that they would see or an old film or a show or something and think, oh, here's my response to that. Here's a version of that. It's become a place where more often than not, you see something and people get inspired by it and go, let's redo that exact thing." So there's more of his quote there, but that's the general sentiment is he feels like instead of George Lucas seeing Flash Gordon and not being able to get the rights to that and creating Star Wars out of whole cloth and synthesizing all of these inspirations into something fresh. It's just a constant state of recycling right now, which, we know as well as anybody. We cover all this stuff all the time. So I kind of love that Abrams is like, I'm just going to focus on original ideas right now. That seems to be his priority. And
But what is he saying about himself? Because he spent the last, 10 years working on Star Wars and Star Trek. like
Yeah,
rebooting
well,
both those franchises.
right. Yeah. And he said, the few things I'm working on right now as a writer are original ideas. I just feel as a director, I would really love to have my next projects be things that didn't pre exist me necessarily. And that echoes comments that he made several years ago now in 2017 when he said, I feel like I've done enough rebooting that I'm more excited about working on things that are original ideas that perhaps one day somebody else will have to reboot instead of, him doing stuff like that all the time. So, yeah, I'm very curious. I like JJ Abrams as a human being. He's a very nice person, and I like the style that he brings to stuff. I just don't feel like his movie output it's been very hit or miss. We'll put it that way. And I would love the idea of him just to create something that is totally unencumbered by decades worth of fandom and all of the baggage that comes into rebooting a huge property like a Star Trek or a Star Wars.
Well, even if you don't talk about the property itself, Abrams, who I think I like a bit more than you, Ben, is often criticized as like kind of a remix artist. Like, he makes Super 8 and that's a kind of remix of Spielberg. I mean, that's an obvious remix of Spielberg. He's, noted that in many interviews.
Sure.
But you look at, all of his work and it's kind of like a remix of other things mashed together. So do you think like that criticism gets to, like, I don't know, this commentary here, do you think this is because that's what he wants to make, or do you think it's because of the criticism he gets?
I think it might be, I guess being a part of all of these huge top tier reboot remake projects over the past few years, he's probably gotten hundreds of interview questions, and yeah, it's probably penetrated his psyche a little bit, like gotten in his head. But I think he says in this quote, I feel like as somebody who started writing in television and telling original stories on film and in TV, it's really something that I do miss. So I think he's coming from a genuine place here. I feel like the industry has changed so much around him from when he came up, and I totally understand the impulse to want to go back and create. He is maybe the biggest beneficiary of something like Star Wars and Star Trek because he got to step into that sandbox and revitalize it for a new generation. And I think he saw what that opportunity did for him as a creative, and like the power that he has. He signed this huge $250 million deal with WarnerMedia a couple years ago. So I think he knows that like part of his success was built on directing Mission Impossible 3 and like doing all of these pre-existing things. And I think he really genuinely wants to give the next generation of storytellers new stuff, which and audiences as well, which I think is like really an exciting place to be for a guy who has been sucked into so many franchises over the years.
I've really liked the original stuff that he's done, especially on TV with Lost and Alias. And I like Super 8, even though the ending is not quite that, JJ Abrams is not as great with the endings as he is the beginnings. But I'd be excited to see him do some more original stuff, and I'm guessing ensuring that his legacy is felt for decades or centuries to come. But you mentioned WarnerMedia, and WarnerMedia was sold to AT&T 5 years ago, and it looks like AT&T is already ready to get out of the movie business. HT, tell us about it.
Yeah, AT&T is looks like it wants its money back after spending $85 billion on Time Warner in 2016, and has now entered a new deal with Discovery, a $43 billion deal that will combine its WarnerMedia entertainment assets with Discovery to create a, quote, premier standalone global entertainment company. So this means that AT&T's WarnerMedia division is basically being sold off to Discovery, and that all of its brands under WarnerMedia, which includes Warner Brothers, HBO, CNN, Cartoon Network, Cinemax, TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, and DC Comics will live under the same roof as the brands under Discovery, which is like Discovery, Food Network, HGTV, Animal Planet.
How does this work, HT? That like Discovery, like they're basically a reality television. Reality, that probably makes it sound bad, but reality and documentary television mega corporation. how did they buy WarnerMedia?
Well, it seems like AT&T was pretty eager to get WarnerMedia off its hands. It's obviously selling its assets for way less than it spent, 85 billion versus the 43 billion that it sold for to Discovery. So it might just be a circumstance thing. Like Discovery was there and they had the cash and the funds. So this means that AT&T can get out of the apparently losing business of streaming and just wash its hands of the entertainment ambitions it had back in 2016.
Peter, I read today that I think part of it might have had to do. There were some rumors that NBC Universal might be merging with WarnerMedia. Obviously, that's not happening now. But I think the speculation that I read among these like financial journalists was the Department of Justice has to approve big mergers like this.
Yeah.
So they think that because there is so little overlap in terms of the content that WarnerMedia has under its umbrella and Discovery Plus or Discovery Channel or whatever Discovery, the company, has under its umbrella, that it will be more likely to be approved for a merger like that versus
Like
some
Netflix
other
or
some company that sort of is swimming in the same pond, so to speak.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think this is big news because this is going to, I mean, this encompasses everything in WarnerMedia, including DC Comics, not just the DC films, but also the comic books. What does this mean for consumers, HG? Or what? I mean, I guess you don't know, but what can you speculate this means for consumers?
Well, it's speculated that, especially for HBO Max, which is under WarnerMedia, and Discovery Plus under Discovery, that, for example, these two streaming networks could be combined into one big mega platform, or perhaps they'll be bundled in a package deal akin to Disney Plus and Hulu. It's all, very unclear right now as to how this will affect consumers, but they will be sharing the same roof. Apparently, AT&T shareholders will receive stock representing 71% of the new company, so that's for shareholders. But it's based on press release and what the Discovery CEO David Zaslav says. The global reach of Discovery will aid in WarnerMedia's attempt to expand internationally. HBO Max, for example, is planning to launch in more international countries soon. So that's something that might be a partnered, like, collaborative process. But as for now, it's unclear how this will affect us. Like, the HBO Max Discovery Plus thing is probably the biggest question for everyone. Like, will it become another confused rollout for HBO Max after it's really fumbled launch back in last year when people weren't sure what HBO Max was and whether it was HBO and who actually had it. So it would be most beneficial for HBO Max to stay as it is and just to do the bundle thing like the Disney Plus Hulu ESPN thing. But who knows? It's all uncharted territory for now, especially as we wait for the deal to close in 2022.
Yeah. It's just so weird because the promise of cutting the cord was always that, like, I wouldn't have to pay for this big bundle package with everything, that I could, if I wanted my HGTV, just, subscribe to that channel, or, that was like the promise of the future, Ben. And now it's like Discovery Plus and HBO Go, and everything's going to be combined into one service. Like, what the heck? What do you think about that?
I think it's actually kind of getting closer to that future that you're talking about, though, because, I think right after, as the streaming boom happened and all of these different companies formed their own individual streaming services, it felt like you now had to pay for all of these different things. But if this deal goes through, then HBO Max and Discovery Plus will theoretically consolidate in some form, and maybe some of that content will be available on, like Aisha was saying, one big service, or at least a bundle or something like that, where I think there's going to be more consolidation in the future, right? Like there are a ton of, I would say, an untenable number of streaming services that exist right now. And I think over the next 5 years or something, you're going to see more of these mergers and at least maybe not in like huge sweeping terms, like WarnerMedia, the entire entity, being merged with another company, but like the streaming services themselves, I think will strike deals where the vast number of streaming services that there are right now will be cut down, because I think people know that like this is an unreasonable thing to ask people to be subscribing to all this stuff, and like there just aren't going to be enough people who can afford to pay for all this stuff. So like, who wants to be the people left on the outside? Like you sort of have to
but
combine forces.
You don't think when you consolidate, it's going to raise the price of the HBO Go Discovery Plus channel, whatever it is going to be like?
I mean, maybe it will. And yeah, maybe you'll be right back around to the same price that you were paying before. But I think just right now, everything is so scattered that at least it will be a little bit more laser focused. And yeah, the pricing will probably just continue to go up and up and up. But yeah, I guess you won't have to remember to check, your fifth streaming service. Like, oh yeah, there was something I was supposed to be watching over here.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to keep our eye out on this one, because who knows what this actually means for us consumers. But let's move on to our final thing. Ben, you were starting this new series on the site on slashfilm.com, and I wanted you to talk about it.
Yeah, so I was talking this over with Jacob Hall, the managing editor of Slash Film, and we sort of cooked up this this idea for a column on the site called Close Up, where it is a new series that is going to drill down on really, really niche moments in movies. So a lot of times on Slash Film, we talk about, stuff like we were just talking about, big industry-wide changes and things like that, or we'll talk about movies and directors' filmographies, and generally like kind of broad term kind of movie stuff. And I thought that it would be fun to have a place on the site where we could really, really drill down on these tiny, tiny moments where even in something like the water cooler episodes of this podcast, where we have freedom to talk about whatever, these moments might sort of pass by in the blink of an eye. We might not even think that they're worth, boring people with in terms of bringing them up, in podcast form. But I think there's a lot of ground to be mined in terms of digging into moments that, have stuck with us in movies over the years that are really, really small and not necessarily the most famous lines or, the biggest catchphrases or whatever, but just like little moments that stuck with us for whatever odd reasons. And it could be a line of dialogue, it could be a particular edit or something, or a shot or a match cut that really stands out to us. So this column is going to be open to all of everybody who contributes to Slash Film, and I'm sure there are going to be tons of people who bring their own entries over the next weeks and months. But I know that we published our first one where I talked to the guy who said it's the Rocketeer in the movie The Rocketeer. So that was a lot of fun. I spoke with the actor. His name is Rick Overton, and he's been in a ton of stuff. And so I just talked about, how I basically interviewed him and wrote about like how it came to be that he was in this really, this tiny one-line role in this movie. I know Jacob has an entry that's essentially locked and loaded that's going to be coming out, I think, next week too. So just, check out slashfilm.com and keep your eye out for some of these entries, because I think there's a lot of opportunity here for people to really show you something about their movie habits and the things that stuck with them, and you will sort of learn a little bit about those moments and the writers themselves, in that process.
This guy who yells "It's a Rocketeer," I haven't read your article yet, but he's a small part of the legacy of that. Would you call it a cult classic, I guess, at this point?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Has he felt that legacy like this? Do people come up to him and yell "It's the Rocketeer"? Like,
I didn't ask him that, but I would guess that they don't, because he has like, I think somewhere like 150 to 200 credits to his name. He's been in a ton of things, so I doubt that people really remember him as the primary thing from that movie, which is 30 years old now. But yeah, I think he talked a little bit about the legacy of the movie in my interview with him, which this part did not make the article itself, but he was just talking about how he really thinks the film is underrated, and he hopes that by people reading this article that it convinces people to either go back and give the movie a second look in case they just saw it once when they were a kid or something like that. Or it will convince people to maybe check out the movie in the first place. Because Rocketeer came out, I think, in the same weekend as Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It just got completely stomped at the box office. And really, it was kind of a forgotten movie for a while. So the movie's streaming on Disney Plus right now. If you want to check it out, I would highly encourage it because I think it's like one of the best comic book movies ever made.
Yeah, and I think Disney has been trying to reboot it for some time. They have do they still have that animated series coming out, The Rocketeers?
I think that's on like Disney Junior or something.
Oh,
I
so
want
it
to
is
say, yeah, that it's been out for a little while, but I've never actually seen an episode. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. That does it for us at Slash Film. You can find all our episodes at Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. Please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.